Empires in the modern world do not fall the way ancient empires once did. Long ago, a superpower like Rome needed centuries to fade away. Its decline was slow, gradual, and spread across generations. But modern empires collapse quickly. They rise higher, fall faster, and disappear suddenly, often so rapidly that citizens living inside them cannot understand how the world changed around them. They go to bed believing everything is stable and wake up in a completely different reality. The surprising thing is that, despite being separated by culture, language, geography, and political systems, modern empires follow the exact same steps every single time. First, they reach their peak. Then, they stretch themselves too far. Then, influence at the edges begins to slip away. And finally, collapse arrives like an avalanche. It feels sudden, but the cracks were there long before anyone noticed. Take the Ottoman Empire. For centuries, it was one of the most powerful forces on Earth. Even in the late 1800s, people believed it would last forever. Maps showed a mighty empire stretching across 3 continents. The Sultan's rule was respected. The empire looked strong. But deep inside, it was breaking. The government borrowed huge sums of money from European powers until the debt became impossible to repay. Nationalist movements grew everywhere. Greeks, Arabs, Armenians, and many others wanted independence. The military, once feared, had fallen behind. When the Balkan states attacked, the Ottomans collapsed much faster than anyone expected. In just 1 year, most of their European territory was gone. Refugees fled to Istanbul. The economy collapsed. And while the empire still existed on paper for a few more years, the truth was clear. The collapse had already happened. A great empire that had lasted 6 centuries fell apart in just a few decades. The British Empire followed a similar path. After World War I, Britain controlled nearly a quarter of the entire world. The sun literally never set on the British flag. But behind this glory, Britain had exhausted itself. The cost of the war drained its treasury. To survive, it borrowed heavily from the United States. Britain kept behaving like a global empire, but the foundation was breaking. Then came World War II. Britain helped win the war, but the victory was so expensive that it shattered the empire financially. The unraveling began almost immediately. India gained independence in 1947. Without India, the financial engine of the empire died. Independence movements spread everywhere, and in 1956, during the Suez Crisis, Britain tried to act like a superpower again. Instead, the United States pressured it to back down. After that moment, the world understood. The British Empire was finished. In less than 25 years, the largest empire in history dissolved into fragments. The Soviet Union collapsed even faster. In 1980, the USSR was one of the world's 2 superpowers. It had nuclear weapons, massive armies, and total control over Eastern Europe. No one believed the system could fall. But the war in Afghanistan drained its strength. Billions were spent, lives were lost, confidence shattered. At the same time, the Soviet economy depended heavily on oil, and when oil prices dropped in the 1980s, the country went into a financial crisis. Gorbachev tried to introduce reforms to save the system, but those changes accidentally exposed even more weaknesses. Suddenly, Eastern Europe began slipping away. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, all broke free one after another. The Berlin Wall fell almost overnight. The outer parts of the empire collapsed first, and once they were gone, the Soviet Union itself fell apart with shocking speed. Within 2 years, a global superpower vanished completely. These stories, separated by time and geography, teach the same lesson. Modern empires collapse quickly. They appear strong on the outside, long after they have already begun to rot on the inside. Their people believe they are exceptional, untouchable, immune to decline. But once an empire becomes overstretched, once it spends more than it earns, once it loses influence at the edges, the fall becomes unavoidable. The warning signs are slow and quiet, but the final collapse is sudden, dramatic, and irreversible. This is the pattern history has repeated again and again. And it is the same pattern that now shadows the United States today. For decades, the United States stood as the only true global superpower. After the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, America entered what many called the unipolar moment, a period where no nation could challenge its military, economic, or cultural dominance. Its currency became the center of global trade. Its technology shaped the modern world. Its military presence stretched across more than 80 countries, and for a long time, it seemed as if this position would last forever, as if America had broken the cycle that had brought down every empire before it. But history has a way of repeating itself, even when people believe they are living in an exceptional era. The early signs of decline are subtle, quiet, almost invisible. They unfold not through dramatic events, but through slow shifts in economics, politics, and global influence. And slowly, over the past 20 years, the United States has entered the same stage of overextension that destroyed the Ottomans, the British, and the Soviets. The first major crack appeared in the form of endless wars. After 2001, the United States launched military operations across the Middle East and beyond. What was supposed to be a quick mission turned into 2 decades of conflict. The wars cost trillions of dollars, thousands of lives, and enormous political capital. The financial burden was staggering, and the wars did not produce the stability or strategic advantages originally promised. Instead, they drained American resources and created long-term obligations around the world. While the United States was focused on these costly conflicts, other nations began quietly rising. China transformed itself into an economic powerhouse. Russia rebuilt its military influence. Countries in Asia, Africa, and South America started forming new alliances that did not rely on Washington. This shift marked the beginning of America's influence slipping at the edges, the same pattern seen in every other collapsing empire. Another major sign came from within. The national debt began to climb at a pace never seen before. In the early 2000s, the debt seemed manageable, but by 2020, it had reached levels that would have shocked earlier generations. By 2025, the debt had crossed $36 trillion, and interest payments alone consumed nearly $1 trillion every year. This created a situation where the government had to borrow more money just to pay the interest on previous borrowing. It is the same trap that once destroyed the Ottomans and crippled the British. Nations do not collapse because they owe money. They collapse because the cost of managing that debt becomes greater than the revenue they can generate. The United States entered this stage quietly. Most citizens did not notice, but economists around the world did. And so did foreign governments who had loaned money to America for decades. One of the most important pillars of American power has always been the dollar. For generations, it served as the world's primary currency. Almost all global trade, especially oil, was priced in dollars. This gave the United States enormous influence. When countries wanted to buy or sell oil, they needed U.S. dollars, which forced them to hold American currency and buy American debt. This created a constant demand for the dollar that kept America rich, powerful, and able to borrow almost endlessly. But in the past few years, that foundation has started to crack. Countries began looking for alternatives to the dollar. China, Russia, India, Brazil, the UAE, and many others began trading in their own currencies. The European Union discussed building a new financial system independent of the U.S., and in 2024, Saudi Arabia quietly ended the petrodollar system that had forced the world to use dollars for oil for nearly 50 years. This one move signaled the beginning of the end of America's unique financial privilege. Once the dollar begins to lose its global dominance, money starts flowing in different directions. Nations reduce the amount of U.S. debt they hold. They build alternative systems that exclude the United States, and slowly, a new world order begins to form, not through war, but through the quiet rearranging of global relationships. This is exactly what happened when the British pound lost its reserve currency status. It took a few years for the world to adjust, but once the shift began, there was no stopping it. Financial power never disappears immediately. It fades, then cracks, then collapses quickly when pressure becomes too great. Meanwhile, inside the United States, Political division grew deeper than at any time in recent memory. Disagreements became hostility. Hostility became hatred. The nation grew fragmented, with each side believing the other was responsible for the country's problems. This internal division weakened the country more than any foreign power ever could. Great empires collapse from within long before they fall from outside pressure. When citizens no longer trust their government, their institutions, or each other, the unity needed to maintain global power fades. It becomes impossible to solve major national issues when large portions of the population no longer agree on basic realities. This erosion of unity is another pattern seen in every empire shortly before decline. Technological power, once America's greatest strength, also began shifting. For years, the United States led the world in innovation. But by the mid-2020s, other nations had caught up. China became a leader in manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and high-speed infrastructure. India surged forward with rapid economic growth and advanced digital systems. Smaller countries invested heavily in technology and education, becoming competitive in fields once dominated by the United States. These rising nations did not need to surpass America individually. They only needed to rise enough to dilute its influence, and together, they did exactly that. The question is not whether the United States will disappear. No modern country vanishes the way ancient empires did. The real question is whether America can adapt, stabilize, and avoid the rapid collapse that history has delivered to every overstretched superpower. The empire may shrink. Its influence may decline. Its dominance may fade. But collapse is never inevitable. It is only the result of refusing to change when the world around you changes. And the world is changing faster than ever. History is whispering the same warning it whispered to the Ottomans, the British, and the Soviets. No empire is immune. No nation is too powerful to fail. And the signs of decline are always invisible until the very end. When collapse comes, it arrives suddenly, not because the fall happened overnight, but because the fall was happening slowly for years while no one was paying attention.